And on the right side was, oh, that's my nose and my mustache on the ground, right by my wrist.
In October of 2016, 61-year-old Lee Brook was hunting in the mountains of Wyoming when he finally spotted and took down an elk. Already exhausted and quite a far walk away from his camp, he decided to leave the elk there and return for the elk meat first thing the following morning, which he did. But when he arrived back there, he noticed something wasn't right. The elk was laying on its other side, meaning something had moved it. And it was at this moment he knew he was in life-threatening danger. A 6-foot-tall, 420-pound grizzly bear had already found this same elk carcass and claimed it as its own. So Lee was now tampering with what this grizzly bear had claimed. Before he could even think about the gravity of this situation, he turned around and saw this gigantic grizzly bear barreling towards him, and he turned to run away, and he didn't make it 2 steps, he says, before this grizzly bear used its jaws to grab onto his backpack that he had on his back and lift him up into the air off of his feet. And as he had him in the air, it used its huge paw to swipe right at his face and knocked him unconscious. After this, it slung him to the ground by his backpack and kind of just continuously mauled him as they both slid down the slope of this mountain 50 yards until finally Lee's body came to a crashing halt when it hit against a large log. And this is where Lee came back to consciousness, and he says he couldn't see very well, but all he knows is that he felt these whiskers brushing against his inner ear and the side of his face, and he knew that this bear was on him. And some voice in his head told him, do not play dead. Despite everything you've heard about how you need to play dead, do not play dead, or you will be killed, because this bear is going to figure out sooner or later that you're not dead yet. So at that point, he uses all his might and stands up, and all he has in his hand is this deboning knife, kind of a small steak knife, butcher knife, and he uses it 4 times and sinks it into this bear. He doesn't know exactly where at the time because he can't see. He says he can see the ground below him, but he cannot see in front of him because of all the blood that is clouding his eyes. But wherever he hits, it's enough to make this bear back off and run away. So in these next few moments, Lee is kind of quickly surveying the ground. He sees his backpack over here to the side in the snow. It's all crumpled up, which he understands why. He knows he was picked up by this gigantic bear in its jaws, so obviously the backpack is just gnarled to pieces. But right beside it, he sees something very shocking and disturbing. Lee saw his nose and mustache all fully intact and attached, just laying in the snow. And at that moment, he realized the extent of what this bear did during those 50 yards that it mauled him down the side of this mountain. So thinking quickly, he grabs it, picks it up, and puts it in his pocket. As he's fleeing, it would take 5 hours of him screaming and trying to hold himself together before finally he was reunited with his hunting buddies, who then called for emergency services. It would take another 7 hours after emergency services arrived to get him to the nearest hospital. Once he arrived there, they took his nose that he had saved in his pocket and attached it to an artery in his right arm to keep it alive and blood pumping into it. It remained there for months until finally they were able to reattach it. Doctors even had to use a portion of his scalp with his hair on his head attached to it to recreate his mustache, as you can see here in this actual photo. But ultimately, Lee never gave up and even went for another hunt on the same mountains, on the same path, to the same exact scene of the attack where he was mauled 2 years later, just to show strength and bravery.